Straight talk from Israel. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. We are live, which means that you could call in. Numbers to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. You could join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where we are live in the chat room the entire show, and the conversation is always fascinating in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman, and we experienced history today. Now, I'm not going to make a huge deal about the signing of the memorandum of understanding, memorandum of cooperation between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. I'm not going to make a huge deal about the fact that Bahrain has said that they want to sign a deal with Israel, and now Morocco's talking about direct flights back and forth from Israel. I'm not going to make a big deal about the fact that the Arab world is finally, so many years later, coming around to the idea that Israel is a country, it's not going anywhere, and it's there to stay. So I'm not going to make a huge deal about it. The reason I'm not going to make a huge deal about it is simply because I don't believe that this is going to last. And I want to talk about this. I want to hear your opinion. I will tell you my opinion. I want to hear your opinion. I think it's going to fall apart like every other Arab-Israel deal has fallen apart. That it starts off nice and friendly, and then suddenly, boom, it collapses in on itself. And there's reasons for that, and we'll talk about the reasons, and we'll talk about why I feel this way when we come back from the break. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio. I want you to call in. Numbers to call in North America are 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. We are live in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, so feel free to join me in the chat room. I'd love to talk to you. I'd love to hear your opinions on this. I'd love for you to call in, but if you're a little shy and you don't want to call in, feel free to join me in the chat room. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman on Israel News Talk Radio.
Always challenging the status quo. Hello, I'm Rod Bryant on Beyond the Matrix here at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I want to encourage you to listen each week, every Wednesday at the same time, for an amazing show that will challenge you, inform you, and inspire. News, views, and wisdom for the nations here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. Don't forget, Beyond the Matrix every week, Wednesday, here on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, and this is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in. The number to call, 301-768-4841. That's in North America. In Israel, you can call in at 02-650-0151. You could join me in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com, where the conversation's always happening and always hopping in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the agreement between the United Arab Emirates and Israel. It seems to me that the United Arab Emirates is taking this very seriously. I saw a letter this week with the UAE essentially ordering hotels to start carrying kosher food. I know the OU, the Orthodox Union out of New York, is working very hard at finding people to go down to the United Arab Emirates to build kosher kitchens and to make sure the kitchens stay kosher. I understand that Israel has started normal flights back and forth from the UAE, and they've made a backdoor deal with Saudi Arabia to fly over Saudi airspace. So these things are happening, and I think it's great. And I think that if it lasts, it will be amazing. The Middle East will be transformed. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has said that there are 4 or 5 other countries that want to sign deals with Israel now, and the list just keeps growing. And the Arab League has told Mahmoud Abbas and his band of terrorists that basically they're no longer needed. They said that it's okay. You were the pawns for a while, and now you're not. Now you're not needed anymore. And so Abbas is kind of floating in his own pond of scum that he had built himself. So here we are. There was an entire seismic shift in things happening in the Middle East, and I think it's great, but I approach this with a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of hesitation, and the reason I hesitate, just slightly hesitate, before celebrating, is because we've been there before. We have seen deals made before. We have seen hope that peace has finally arrived, that Israel's finally going to achieve her role in the Middle East world, that Israel finally be recognized for the country that she is, and the technological advances, medical advances, and all the other advances that Israel has created in that region, and then it's all come crashing down. So any person with a normal brain who understands history will be a little hesitant to say that this is the best thing that's happened in the Middle East in the last 25 years. Although people are saying that. There are plenty of detractors out there who are saying that this is horrible, but they're not opposing this for the reasons you think they are. They're opposing, many people are opposing these deals because Donald Trump had his hands in them. And their hatred for Trump outweighs the benefits of having peace where people aren't killing each other. So it's just mind-boggling that people who cry, "Oh my gosh, we need peace. We need to condemn Israel because they're stopping peace in the Middle East." And these are the people who are now saying, "Oh, a peace agreement with Israel? No, we can't accept that. There's no peace in Israel. No, we can't accept that." You know the real reason, and I'll let you in on the real reason, between you and me, the real reason that these people oppose peace in the Middle East, the real reason that these people stand against every peace agreement every time anything moves forward in human rights, anytime anything moves forward to make Israel a more acceptable country in the Middle East, amongst the Arabs and amongst the people in the Middle East. The reason is that the hatred of Israel has become a cottage industry, become a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are university faculties devoted to disparaging Israel on university campuses. There are billions of dollars being spent for different organizations to come up with propaganda opposing Israel. The BDS movement itself, the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, which is just a veiled attempt at destroying Israel economically from the inside out, they've readily admitted that their main goal is not the normalization of human rights in the Middle East. That's not their main goal. They don't care about human rights in the Middle East. They've readily admitted that their main goal is the destruction of the state of Israel, that their purpose of existence is to destroy the state of Israel. So these people who have a vested financial interest in strife in the Middle East, in fighting in the Middle East, in war in the Middle East, are the ones who are opposing any peace agreement that Israel has, and sometimes they're the ones who torpedo it. What do I mean by that? Well, let's think back a little bit and take a look at the Oslo Accords. The Oslo Accords in 1993, I remember when they were signed. I was a program director of a TV station at the time, and we ran the ceremony of the Oslo Accords. We ran the ceremony nonstop for a 24-hour loop on that station because so many people wanted to see them, and it happened early in the morning, and people weren't able to watch it. And We ran it over and over and over again. Okay. There was so much hope after the Oslo Accords. Of course, you had your segment of people who oppose it, and for rightful reasons. Giving up land is never easy. Giving up land is dismantling cities and people's homes and throwing people out of their homes is not an easy concession to make, especially when you're getting very little in return. So I understand the hesitation to accept the Oslo Accords, but I also have to look at it from the other side and say, okay, this was a symbol of hope that the Oslo Accords would lead to something better, would lead to some kind of peace in the Middle East, would lead to some kind of understanding between the Arabs and the Jews, and the Jews and the Arabs would be able to live next to each other in some kind of zones, like they broke up zones. I mean, if you actually read the Oslo Accords, it was actually a ridiculous deal. And the Arabs were stupid for walking away from it, as they did numerous times over the next 20 years. They were kind of dumb because they got everything and Israel got nothing. It was a really bad deal for Israel. So the fact that it didn't work out was actually good for Israel. But the Oslo Accords was a really bad deal for Israel. Now, when we look back at that, who torpedoed the Oslo Accords? It was Yasser Arafat. Then who torpedoed the Accords after that? Well, it was Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas. Every time a deal was signed with the Palestinian Authority, they torpedoed the deal. They found a reason to destroy it. And in fact, just 2.5 months ago, as we discussed right here on the show, Mahmoud Abbas announced that all deals are canceled with Israel. Then last week he complained that Israel is violating a treaty with him over building accessible ramps for wheelchairs to go up to the Cave of the Patriarchs in Hebron. So here he's saying all deals are canceled, and there he's saying you're breaking a deal. So the hypocrisy is amazing, but nobody ever calls these people out on hypocrisy because it's $1 billion industry. So the people who are opposing this United Arab Emirates and Israel deal are the same people who oppose all the other deals, the same people who have their hands in the cookie jar and are afraid that if these deals actually work, that money will never be there again, that they won't be able to keep sticking their hands in the cookie jar. And this is why many, many different organizations, these Jewish organizations, have opposed this. If Israel achieves peace, they have no reason to exist. Thousands of people will be out of work. And so it's in their best interest, even though they're Israel advocacy, and I use advocacy very loosely, even though they're Israel advocacy organizations, it seems to be in their very interest to keep the strife going, to keep the war going, to keep the fighting going. I know nobody ever verbalizes this. I'm sure a lot of people understand this. Nobody ever verbalizes this, and I think it's important that we talk about it and that we understand that these deals could be good. I have a little bit of hesitation accepting deals because I know history and I understand that historically deals don't work, especially deals between Jews and Arabs. This one may work, but we'll see. And at the same time, I understand that my opposition of it and other people's opposition of it are radically different. The motivations behind them are extremely different. I would love for this to work. I really hope that this deal works and the deal with the next one works and all the deals work and they last forever. And I really hope that Israel becomes the jewel of the Middle East and the Arab countries and Israel cooperate together and they build up the Middle East to be the Riviera of the new Riviera of the world. The old Riviera is gone. So build up a new Riviera of the world. Make it the tourist destination of the world, the entire Middle East. I would love that. That would be the best thing that would happen in my lifetime. And I would be very happy if that happened in my lifetime. But the forces of evil always exist, and the forces of greed always exist. And we have to remember, human nature is always greed. And so the people who rely on the fighting and rely on the propaganda and rely on the training of advocates and the training of strife and the training of defending and the training of anti-Jewism and the fighting of anti-Jewism, these people have everything to lose by deals like this one. It's a sad commentary. I understand that. I really understand that. People should be happy, and especially people who claim to be advocates for Israel should be extremely happy that Israel signed this deal. But I know, and I've spoken to quite a few people, I know that there are a lot of people very worried these days because they might lose their job. Now you can call in and we can talk about this. 301-768-4841 in North America. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. Join me in the chat room on IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm Howie Sullinger. This is Political Hitman.
Shalom, everybody. Making a difference often takes just one moment and one person at a time. I am Orly Benny Davis, your show host on Israel News Talk Radios from Jerusalem with love. You'll be hearing people talking about politics, religion, social issues, and making a better tomorrow. Join me, Orly Benny Davis, for God and Country. From Jerusalem with love.
Wednesdays on Israel News Talk Radio.
Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Did you know this psalm and many others were composed by a Jewish shepherd and musician who later became a king? Would you like to know some of the inner meanings of psalms to help you connect with God and strengthen your soul? An exciting and easy-to-read book is now available which will help you do just that. Software for the Soul, Psalms for Everyone, available on Kindle, Audible, and Amazon.com. Software for the Soul.
Modesty at the beach? It isn't just about body image. It's about feeling good. Modest swimsuits, so we don't get burned by the sun.
So we won't get ogled by strangers.
So we'll feel free to express ourselves without the need to expose ourselves.
Let Marcy Modest help you to cover up what you want, how you want.
Made in Israel.
Visit marcymodest.com. That's MARSEA modest.com.
And get a 10% discount on your first purchase.
Political Hitman. I'm Howie Sullinger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to join me in the chat room by going to IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. You could call into the show. The number to call in North America, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 02-650-0151. I got a message from Doogie. Dougie's watching the show on Periscope. Doogie, thank you so much for messaging me. I appreciate it. He says that these are historic deals. Yes, they are, Doogie. They are historic deals, but every single agreement that Israel made with the Palestinian Authority, every single deal that Israel achieved with Jordan, with Egypt, every single deal were very historic deals. But not all of them kind of worked out the way that they planned to. So Israel has officially has a peace agreement with Jordan, but the peace is a very cold peace. It's not a warm peace. They're not embracing each other. Two countries don't really like each other, and they I mean, there's trade going on, but it's very cold. It's like the Cold War. Israel's deal with Egypt wasn't really a great deal. Israel gave up land. Egypt gave Israel peace. And Israel and Egypt don't have much trade. It's been a pretty cold relationship. Hosni Mubarak was a cold relationship with. And now with Sisi, it's not such a warm relationship. So when we look at the deals that Israel has made in the past, Israel has always given up concessions. Israel has always given up land or given out prisoners or some kind of concession. And they've gotten very little in return. And the reason for that is quite simple, that Israel has always been the one who wanted peace. Israel has always been the one who's chased peace and willing to give up almost anything to achieve peace. But Israel is always the one who gets the short end of the stick. And this has been the historical reality of deals with Israel and other countries. Now, will this deal be different? Maybe. Time will tell. This deal might be different. I'm hoping, and Dougie, I agree with you, historic deals, I hope that they work. I had a lot of hope that the Oslo Accords would lead to something. I didn't particularly like the Oslo Accords. In fact, I led a couple of protests against the Oslo Accords because I thought that Israel was giving up too much. But I was hoping. I mean, there's always a hope, even if you oppose something. You always hope that there'll be some kind of positive outcome at the end of it. That perhaps more negotiation, perhaps more talking, perhaps reality on the ground will change things and make it a little better than what it's on paper. Sometimes what looks bad on paper is actually really good on the ground, and sometimes what looks really good on paper is not so good on the ground. So I'm really hoping that this, which looks great on paper, will actually pan out and be great. But there's a little bit of hesitation. And the reason I have that little bit of hesitation is not because of the other sellouts who are only interested in the cash and only interested in their jobs. And if there's no more fighting, then they don't have jobs anymore. Forget about those people. The reason I have hesitation is because I'm afraid that when normalization starts and Israelis and other Jews start going to Abu Dhabi, that there will be crazy Arabs who will go there and try to kill people there. And if the terrorism starts in Abu Dhabi and people are afraid to go to the United Arab Emirates, what is going to happen is this deal is going to fall apart. So there's always people out there who are going to sabotage it. The Palestinian Authority has already threatened to do this. They've threatened to sabotage this deal. They're not happy about the deal because there's nothing in it for them. They're very selfish, and there's nothing there for them. And even if there was something there for them, unless it hurts Israel, they're not interested in it anyway. This actually benefits Israel and benefits the United Arab Emirates. So we're at a point. We're at a point where the Palestinian Authority is getting marginalized again. Now, they were like this. Now, we can't forget history. Once again, we always forget history. And we have to look back and we have to remember history. They were marginalized and they were almost completely out of the picture before the 1993 Oslo Accords, before the 1991 Spanish, the Madrid Conference in 1991 kind of revived the Palestinian Authority. Before that, they were pretty much a dead organization. And the only reason they were revived at the time was because the United States and Israel didn't want to negotiate with Hamas. Hamas had taken over. In fact, Hamas won an election. They drove the Palestinian Authority out of power, and they won the election. They were the democratically elected government of all of the Palestinian Authority people. They were the democratically elected government. Israel and the United States decided that they didn't like them, and Israel and the United States propped up the Palestinian Authority and pushed Hamas into Gaza. And I don't know if anyone remembers history, because I do. In Gaza, they had a civil war between the Hamas and the Palestinian Authority, and Hamas won the war and killed off most of the Palestinian Authority people who were living in Gaza, and the rest of them fled with Israel's permission out of Gaza. So Israel revived the Palestinian Authority. Mahmoud Abbas, who was there at the time, and he's been there for 50 years, seems to forget these little facts. I mean, he forgets a lot. I mean, the whole narrative of the Palestinian Authority is made up. It's fabricated. So he tends to forget reality. He gets lost in his own lies, and that's really where we're at now. The Palestinian Authority has been marginalized again, rightfully so. They don't deserve the recognition that they were getting. So they were marginalized, and now the people who are peacemakers, the people who want to push peace, people who want to promote peace, the people who want to live in peace, are the ones at the forefront. And I think that is the perfect way to go. The only worry I have is that these disruptors, the Palestinian Authority, created by the Arab League in 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. My only fear is that the Palestinian Liberation Organization is going to try to disrupt this by committing terror, either in Israel on people going there, or there on people coming there. And this is the fear I have, and I'm hoping, and I know that it's the fear that the Israeli government has, it's the fear that the Emirates have, and I'm really hoping that they address these fears. The only people who could ensure that this does not happen, the only people who could make sure that this doesn't happen, is the Arab League the coalition of Arab countries that rule the area. So this Arab League could ensure that this happens peacefully, but the Palestinian Authority could go rogue. So they went to the Arab League last week, and they asked the Arab League to condemn this agreement, and the Arab League sent them packing. They said, no, we're not going to condemn it. And then they went to Saudi Arabia, and they asked Saudi Arabia for money, and Saudi Arabia told them to go speak to Arafat's wife, who stole billions of dollars from the Palestinian Authority. Well, Arafat stole billions of dollars. His wife has it now. And go get some money from her. So it seems like the Arab League is on board with these peace agreements. And if that is the case, then the Arab League is on board with these things, then they're the only ones who could ensure that the Palestinian Authority stays in check and doesn't cause trouble and doesn't cause problems in the United Arab Emirates or in Israel in regards to this. So what happens to the Palestinian Authority now, though? That's the question. Is their cause dead? Well, we have to understand that the origins of the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian so-called people, the origins of this was that they were created to be a disruptor to Israel. The whole reason that they were created in 1964, before that there were no Palestinians. In 1964, the Palestinians were created with the Palestinian Liberation Organization, with Egyptian Yasser Arafat as the head of it. And the only reason they were created in 1964 was to disrupt Israel, was to commit terror in Israel, was to cause unrest in Israel. And it was in retaliation for the loss that the Arab countries had in the 1948 and 1956 wars. So they wanted to destroy Israel. They couldn't do it militarily, so they created the Palestinian Liberation Organization to try to destroy Israel internally through terrorism and through actions within the Israeli borders. Now, when that didn't work, and the Palestinian Authority the Palestinians and Palestinian Authority were complete failures in destroying Israel, they're trying the same tactic, but they're doing it a little differently with the BDS movement. So the Boycott, Divestment, Sanction movement, which has gained a lot of steam over the last couple of years, is actually a replacement movement for the failed experiment of the PLO. It's really interesting if you take a look at this. The PLO was created in the guise of, at the time, of the Black Panthers and these other liberation movements that had existed around the world, and they were created within the same context of these liberation movements, and all the liberation movements pretty much failed. And so then you take a look at now, the way that you destroy things and the way you build things up and destroy things is through the economy. So the BDS movement was created to replace the PLO as the internal conflict to destroy Israel. We boycott Israel economically. Israel can't survive without economics, without people spending money there. Therefore, the country will rot from the inside out. Amazing. When you think about it, it's absolutely fascinating. In North America, you can give me a call, 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number is 0265-00151. You could join me in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. My name is Howie Silberger, and this is Political Hitman.
You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
This is Shai Ben-Tekoa, and each week I'll be webcasting to you from Judea, origin of the word Jew, a people besieged and beleaguered in every generation. Nazi Germany's but a memory, but in its place the world invented the phantom Palestinians as this generation's internationally authorized Jew killers. Tune in for a different slant on life in Israel, Phantom Nation, every Monday.
Hi, I'm Rabbi David Aaron. The soul basics are the most profound, the most essential, and yet often the most neglected in our education. Join me for Soul Talk on Israel's News Talk Radio and discover the secrets to love, spiritual growth, and personal power.
How did a nice Jewish girl from Delaware end up living in Israel? Shalom, I'm Natalie Sapinski. Join me on my show, Returning Home. Meet different people who have moved to Israel. Hear their personal stories, their highs, their lows, and everything in between. Each week, we talk to experts on immigration and the process of moving to Israel. Listen to Returning Home every Thursday, only on Israel News Talk Radio.
Political hitman. I'm Howie Silberger, your political hitman, right here on Israel News Talk Radio. Feel free to call in North America. Number to call. It is 301-768-4841. In Israel, the number to call is 02-650-0151. You could join me in the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. I'm in the chat room the entire show. And, of course, we have a lot of people in the chat room. They're always chatting, so that's why it's called chat room. So feel free to join the chat room at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. But I really want to hear your opinion, so feel free to call in. If you agree with me, disagree with me, that's fine. You could call in. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody who has any opinion on this topic or any topics that we talk about on this show. Once again, let me give you the number, 301-768-4841, 02-650-0151. You can find those numbers on the top of the page at IsraelNewsTalkRadio.com. So, here we are. A week, less than a week, just a few days before the Jewish New Year. A peace agreement signed in the United States, achieving peace between the United Arab Emirates and Israel, two countries that never had relations. In the history of the countries, they never had relations. A story came out today that Morocco is now organizing a direct flight from Israel to Morocco. That has never happened before either. And President Donald Trump has stated that there's 4 or 5 other countries that are now waiting to sign deals with Israel. They want the economic stimulus from Israel. They want the economic plus, and they want to be able to be friends and to work with Israel. Is it a coincidence that this is happening just before the Jewish New Year? Some people, cynical people, not me, I'm not a cynic, but cynical people would say that this is very suspect timing. Not only is it the Jewish New Year, it's a month and a half before an American election, and Donald Trump is trying to put that feather in his cap to win the American election. That may be true. This is definitely not going to hurt him. So it's quite possible that it is true that this was orchestrated by Trump for the election, so he could win the election. The timing is perfect for him to glide on this right down to November, the beginning of November. It's about a month and a couple of days away. That's quite possible. The people who hate Trump will never accept this deal because it has Donald Trump's stamp on it, and anything that Donald Trump touches, nobody likes. It's evil. The activists, the political activists, the Jewish activists, and the Israel activists that continuously fight for Israel and continuously fight against people who hate Israel and continuously fight to fix the misconceptions about Israel. Those people hate this deal because it takes a little bit of their power away and has the potential, if Israel achieves peace with all the countries in the Middle East, it has the potential of destroying their careers, so they hate the deal. And it's fascinating following all of this on social media. I watch all of these people, and I listen to them, and I watch all their and I read everything that they write, and I try to understand their perspective. I think it's important that when you talk about subjects so publicly, and I have this is a very public platform that I have here, that you have to understand everybody's perspective. You have to understand where people are coming from. Sometimes I'll make an argument here, and I'll get feedback from listeners saying, "How dare you say that?" And I'll read the feedback 3 or 4 times before I'll understand that what I meant to say isn't exactly the way it came out. I'll go back and listen to the show, and then I'll realize that okay, it could have been interpreted in 2 different ways, and some people interpreted it one way, and other people probably interpreted it the way I meant it. And I understand that we all have different perspectives, and we all have different backgrounds, and we all have different ways of looking at things. I get it. I understand it completely. And I think it's important that we have a well-rounded understanding that everybody has a different perspective and everybody has a different opinion on everything. And once we have that agreement, that we could agree to disagree, that we could express opinions, and we should be able to express opinions freely without the danger of repercussions. Once we agree to that, then society would be a much better place. I mean, that's not where we're at now, with Black Lives Matter activists and Antifa running around burning down the United States, and people who believe in political correctness trying to silence everybody else. We're not really at that stage yet. So when I get on the show, I take the responsibility very seriously, and I tell you what I think. I'm not one to hold back, so I tell you what I think, and I encourage you to call in. And the reason we have open lines is because if you disagree with me, you could always call in. You could talk to me. The reason I have an email address, the reason I'm on social media is that you could message me. You could call in. You could be part. You could talk to me. This is why I do these things. I'm a very opinionated person. I like to express my opinion. So here we are at the crossroads. Now we have 2 choices. We're going into a new year, clean, fresh slate for everybody. Clean, fresh slate. Going into a new year. And we're at a crossroads politically. So if the world, or at least the normal world, decides that we want peace in the Middle East, that we want Israel to achieve the peace that she has deserved since her founding in 1948. If we want that, then we, as people who support Israel, we as people who love Israel, we as people who love the people of Israel, have to work hard at ensuring that there aren't other people out there that are going to throw a monkey wrench into this whole plan. We have to work hard at ensuring that the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, Mahmoud Abbas, and his gang of terrorists are held accountable for every action they take. We have to ensure that our countries, around the world, places that we live in, we have to talk to our politicians and ensure that these countries are not funding groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the Palestinian Authority. We have to ensure that aid, and I put aid in quotation marks, that aid is not being sent to these people. Billions of dollars aren't being sent to these people so that they could build more bombs and kill more people. I don't know if you know this, and many people do and many people don't, but there are bomb balloons flying in from Gaza into Israel and blowing up in Israel. So the fighting has never stopped. So while Israel is making peace with countries outside of their borders, the people living inside their borders who aren't their citizens and who are there to disrupt them, who are created, who are designed, created, and educated to destroy Israel. This is their whole purpose. They're programmed for this. These people are still in existence, and this is an existential danger to Israel. And it must be taken care of. It should have been taken care of years ago. Okay, it wasn't. Now it must be taken care of. In order to ensure that this kind of peace will continue and the momentum continues forward, the backward-thinking people who want to destroy peace, who want to destroy Israel, who want to destroy any chance of a normal life in the Middle East, have to be taken care of. Now, when I say taken care of, I don't necessarily mean eliminated. I don't mean you have to go and kill them all. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is taken care of is their leadership has to be removed, their education systems have to be revised, and they have to be taught that if you live in peace, you could achieve greatness. if you live in peace, all the world's riches come to you. Instead of being taught that the Jew is the infidel and must be destroyed at all costs. Until that happens, until the internal problems, Hamas, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, until these two problems are dealt with properly, and dealt with extremely properly, until these two issues are dealt with, and the education system, and the way that the PLO's supporters are treated and Hamas supporters are treated, until things change that way, a peace like the peace agreement signed, as historic as it is, will never achieve its greatness, because the disruptors inside Israel will continue to destroy it. I wanted to take this opportunity, we have a couple of minutes left to the show, I wanted to take this opportunity to wish you and yours and everybody a very happy New Year, a happy and healthy New Year. I hope that that you stay healthy, that Corona doesn't come anywhere near you. I hope and pray that the coronavirus disappears in this New Year, that Hashem, that God has mercy on his people and on the people of the world, and that coronavirus retreats and disappears. I hope and I pray that peace actually is achieved in the Middle East, that we will see less violence, more peace, more love, less war. I hope and I pray that this new year sees the light shining from the Jewish people onto the world, and that more Jews see the light and walk towards it, and rejoin their heritage, their religious heritage, their national heritage, and becomes part, and that becomes part of their lives. I hope and I pray that more Jews decide to move to Israel and to get out of the cesspool that has become the United States of America. I hope and I pray that Jews wake up and realize that the Messiah will only come when Jews realize that the Messiah is coming. I'm Howie Silberger. This is Political Hitman right here on Israel News Talk Radio. I'll see you again next week.
Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. Just click the orange button at the top of the IsraelNewsTalkRadio.home page, log in as yourself or an anonymous guest, and join in on the fun. You'll meet other listeners from all over the world who listen to Israel News Talk Radio, and you can make new friends. Israel News Talk Radio's chat room. It's the closest you can get to being in the studio with us.
We love listening to Israel News Talk Radio.
Where can you get the inside news on Israel? At Israel News Talk Radio, we're dedicated to sharing Israel's inside story with the world by providing our listeners with news on Israeli politics, current affairs, and Israeli Jewish culture. The Israel News Talk Radio homepage also provides you, the listener, with useful information at your fingertips, with scrolling news headlines, weather, currency exchange, Shabbat candlelighting times, and so much more. Our radio programming is always accessible and on demand. We operate absolutely free of charge for everyone, everywhere. If you love what we do, partner with us now by becoming an Israel News Talk Radio supporter. With your support, you'll be inscribed on our Israel News Talk Radio Wall of Fame. There's nothing like us in the world. Be part of something great. Israel News Talk Radio. Straight talk from Israel.
If you love Israel News Talk Radio, then you'll love our Facebook page. We keep you up to date on what's happening in Israel, plus little surprise treasures that we don't share on the radio. Go now to follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Israel News Talk Radio Facebook page, and don't forget to subscribe and follow us by clicking on the like button. We post great stuff there that you'll want to share. Israel News Talk Radio on Facebook and Israel News Radio on Twitter.
News, opinion, and more. You're listening to Israel News Talk Radio.